everyone, Allie here. Two things we need to talk about today before this episode is one, sorry about the late upload. Our unreliable editor, me, fell sick and we didn't get this out in time. Also, I wanted to apologize for the audio quality. We're not really sure what happened, but we're going to look into it and fix it for the next episode, but we really like this episode, so we're still going to post it anyway. Enjoy!
Hi everyone, you're listening to The Crisis of Readers. We're your hosts, Mac
and Allie. This is episode 4, The Making of a Modern Classic, where we're going to be talking about The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins.
Okay, so this episode is actually going to be one of two parts. So we're going to only talk about the first book today, and we'll talk about the next two next week.
Like all of our other book podcasts, the first will be a spoiler-free synopsis, which we'll talk about our overall feelings and impressions of the book, which might be a little bit more loosey-goosey because this book has been out for a really long time, and I feel like if you haven't read The Hunger Games,
you should have already.
Not even you should have already, but you have to expect a little bit of some spoilers to come through.
Yeah, that's fair.
And after our spoiler-free section, it will be followed by a in-depth deep dive where we'll talk about a lot of spoilers. And as always, we'll give a warning before that.
Yeah. Some content warnings for this episode. We'll be discussing abandonment, alcoholism, animal death, blood, death in general, and death of a parent, depression, gore, murder, parental abuse, PTSD, racism, and violence.
So the book is by Suzanne Collins, who is, I don't know anything about that lady, but what her books have taught me about her is that she is crazy. She's just a really good writer. It's insane.
Yeah. Had she published anything before Hunger Games?
I'm looking it up right now. It says, in 1991, Suzanne Collins began her professional career writing for children's television. She worked on the staffs of several Nickelodeon shows, including the Emmy-nominated hit Clarissa Explains It All and The Mystery Files of Shelby Woo. For preschool viewers, she penned multiple stories for the Emmy-nominated Little Bear and Oswald. She also co-wrote the Rankin Bass Christmas special, Santa Baby, with her friend Peter Bacalian, which was nominated for a WGA award in animation. Most recently, she was the head writer for Scholastic Entertainment's Clifford Puppy Days and Flarelancer for Wow Wow Wasby while working on a kids' WB show called Generation O. She met children's author and illustrator James Proimos, who talked her into giving children's book a try. And then she went on to write her books, which include The Underling Chronicles and The Hunger Games.
So yes, she did a lot of TV before she actually started writing.
Yes.
Before she wrote books. That is interesting. But I guess it makes sense. She's talked about, I feel like Hunger Games is very, especially when I was rereading it in prep for this, it is very, like, it's obviously entertainment focused because the Hunger Games are televised, but there's a lot of it that's, like, very playing into the camera. She talks about, in the book, Katniss, like, talks about a lot how she's playing up for the camera. She's like, there's probably a camera here, and I bet the audience are loving it. And I was like, that is such a specific thought process to have. But it makes sense if Suzanne Collins was used to writing for TV. That is probably the sort of thought process she was typically having. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. No, we'll talk about this later once we get further into our discussion, but we will be talking about what the Hunger Games would look like in modern days. Because I feel like there was like a dystopian feel to it, but there was a lot of technological advancements in the Hunger Games. But when Hunger Games came out, social media was not as prevalent in society as it is now. And I have to think about how that would have changed the landscape that she wrote this book in.
100%.
And we will be talking about it. We don't have to do that right now, but that is a sneak peek of what's to come.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because that is such a good point.
Yes. So our obligatory read the back of the book so you know what the book is about. Winning means fame and fortune, losing means certain death. The Hunger Games have begun. In the ruins of a place once known as North America lies the nation of Panem, a shining capital surrounded by 12 outlying districts. The capital is harsh and cruel and keeps the districts in line by forcing them all to send one boy and one girl between the ages of 12 and 18 to participate in the annual Hunger Games, a fight to the death on live TV. 16-year-old Katniss Everdeen regards it as a death sentence when she steps forward to take her sister's place in the games. But Katniss has been close to dead before, and survival for her is second nature. Without really meaning to, she becomes a contender. But if she is to win, she will have to start making choices that weigh survival against humanity and against life, and life against love.
How did you get introduced to the Hunger Games for the first time?
Oh, I have no idea. It was so long ago. I read it in middle school. It came out in 2008, I believe. So how old was I in 2008?
You would have been like 11,
which means I was in middle school. I don't know how I got introduced to it. I don't know where it came from. I just read it one day. That's all I know.
I have a very distinct memory of actually being introduced to it because my school did I don't know if your school did this. They did the thing where like you had a reading chart on the wall, and you would like read a book if you took a quiz about it, and then you could put like a star on the wall. And I was, of course, obscenely competitive about it, because I liked reading and was like, I can read faster than everybody, and I could. That fun fact, the academic award in middle school I won was for reading the most books in my grade.
We didn't have that academic award. That's so upsetting.
You just got valedictorian.
Yeah, we had middle school valedictorian, and that's what I won.
But I guess my teacher at some point was just like, I think you'd really like this book, and specifically gave it to me. And I was like, okay, and read it. And it like unlocked some things. I don't think I had ever read dystopian before. I pretty much was very solidly into fantasy at the time. And it like unlocked something. Hunger Games like really made me deep dive into dystopian, and like in high school and in college on 2 separate occasions I wrote like fairly in-depth research papers about like the Hunger Games as an example of the dystopian genre, in 2 different ways, because it really had such a profound impact upon me.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking back, I might have read it a couple years after it came out. Because I think what happened is I read it after reading the Percy Jackson series for this first time. Because I like had a weird relationship with reading in middle school where I didn't like to read until like probably like 6th, 7th grade at all. Like I just didn't want to read. And then I read one book series, and that changed the scope of my life forever. And then I became a very avid reader. And I refuse to tell you what book series that was because it was so embarrassing and so contrary to what I am. But I still think about those books all the time. Actually, no, I'm going to tell you because it is so... It's just...
Please tell me.
It's this book series. It's called... This information has been redacted because Ollie is simply too embarrassed for you to know. Yeah, I read those, and those changed the way I, like, interacted with reading after that. I was like, this is great. Stories are amazing. I will be reading all of them. So that was, like, that. And then I read the Percy Jackson series right after, and that was, like, the, sealing the deal that I was going to be an avid reader. And then after that, I read the Hunger Games series. And we also did have we didn't have a star chart, so we had this thing called Accelerated Reader, which was an actual like computer program that our school like subscribed through, and books were assigned points based on
how hard they were. It was like, I think that's what we had. I just think that they put the results from that on the wall.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because they skewed our you had a goal of how many points you had to read before to pass the like that part of your English grade. So, and then that was based on your reading level. So I was just blowing through my goals. Like they gave me, I think I started with like 30 points, and by like 2 months in, they were like, yeah, we're gonna have to raise you to 100 points. Because like it's too easy for you to attain 30 points. So that's when I really started picking it up, because I remember taking those tests on it. I was like, I know this one.
Yeah, you took the quizzes on it.
And it was so funny because you had to take a test on everything you read. So I read like Twilight, and I remember taking the quizzes on Twilight.
I definitely did not take the quizzes on Twilight, which is crazy, because I definitely read Twilight. No, actually, I think I read Twilight before, because I read Twilight at my old middle school. So then I switched to my new, and my old middle school did not have advanced reader because there were 6 people in my grade, so we didn't do anything.
Did you switch halfway through middle school too?
Yeah.
I also switched schools halfway through middle school.
Same.
And that's when I got accelerated reader. I didn't get accelerated reader before I switched schools. So before that, I had started the Twilight series in the old middle school, and then when we switched to the other middle school and we had accelerated reader, I finished the Twilight series. So I was taking like quizzes on like Breaking Dawn, which was hilarious.
Oh my god.
They have like talk, and they're like, when Bella and Edward make love, what does he break? And I was like, this is crazy. I'm in the middle of my middle school like this.
That is wild, actually. What a random similarity. For the listeners, we have a lot of, when we met, we figured out, besides just like enjoying things the same for a lot of things, we also figured out we had a lot of similarities that are very random. We both have weak tooth enamel.
Dads who were mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Is your dad still a mechanic?
Yeah, he's still a mechanic.
Oh, okay. My dad did leave the mechanic profession. He went to become a baker.
Your dad's just done so much.
Yes, my dad's rap sheet is very impressive.
Okay, back to the Hunger Games.
Yes. I think the Hunger Games was, I mean, besides the fact that it was like the start of like the dystopia boom, it's one of the only books that did it really well.
It is one of the books
this
that
is my
did it really
hot
well.
take. Listen, hot take alert. You do not have to agree with this. I think there are 2 book series that did dystopian justice in any way, and those are the only 2 that are valid. And if you tell me that you think any of them are beaten by a different, I don't agree with you. I'm so sorry. I think you're wrong.
You want to share with the class what the 2 series are?
It's the Hunger Games series, and then the Legend series by Marie Lu.
Yes, I love Legend. I love Marie Lu. Anyway, specifically Hunger Games. I do agree. It was definitely like the springboard for the dystopian genre in general, and I think did it pretty much the best. There are some other ones, obviously, like we both love Legend.
Let me actually, I want to revise that statement. It was the springboard for the modern day dystopian that would affect,
yes,
like our generation of readers, because like,
yeah, there are a bunch
really
of other
good
ones that are also really good.
But you lose like a little bit of like, you know what my favorite dystopian novel to talk about, that like the guy when this is another side. This is gonna have a lot of sides because this book is so old that
it's also like so pivotal to a lot of genre. I feel like it's easy to kind of go on these tangents about it because it played such a central role in developing young adult fiction.
Yeah. But Fahrenheit 451.
Oh, I want to read Fahrenheit 451 so badly.
You've never read it?
No.
Oh my god, it's a very good book. It's a very good book, and it's a very dystopian book about the idea of like media control, and it's actually probably very relevant to today, where like there's a lot of political tyings on like what media can be out there and like controlling books and banning books and stuff like that. But I have to imagine that when that book came out, it was insane, like, because the technology that they added into the book is like so ahead of its time, but it's crazy because a lot of the stuff that he predicted is how technology is now.
That's kind of wild.
Like, at one point, he's, like, describing this, like, really fancy futuristic TV, and it's just a flat screen TV.
Just invented flat screen TVs.
And then at one point, I think he's talking about, like, VR. He's like, she's wearing special glasses where she's, like, in the show. And I'm like, yeah, that's VR.
That's... You've found VR. I know another one is Feed. It's by M.T. Anderson. And when was this published? This is another one that's kind of crazy. So it was published in 2002. And it basically just is very social media focused, basically. Basically, people have an implant implanted in their mind and essentially have a social media feed just constantly going through their head. And it's about that. And this was another book that I included in my dystopian analysis in high school.
I love the dystopian genre.
Me too. Especially as a teenager, I feel like there was something really, I guess not comforting, but relatable about, like, screaming against authority so much. Because, like, as a teenager, kind of everything, you're, like, you feel uncomfortable in your skin, and you're, like, kind of rebelling just by, like, existing.
Yeah, another good one is The Giver. The Giver was crazy.
Of course.
There's a short story about, like, a dystopian world where everyone has to have, like, a hindrance so that they're equal to everyone else.
I think that's
I forget what the name of it.
I think it's Kurt Von Ewe.
It might be.
I also might not be pronouncing his last name right. I'm going to be so honest. But I know it was the ballerina who has, like, weights on her.
Yeah. And there's, like, people who have to wear masks because they're, like, too attractive.
Yes.
And one guy has to wear, like, weights because he's too strong. Like, things like that. That one's also really good.
That is a really good one as well.
Like, I feel like even if you do dystopian badly, you still, like, have a good story.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a big fan of Divergent. Did I read all the books? Yes, and it was fun. It was a good little dystopian thing.
Yes.
I think certain ones, like, that's one of those ones I feel like didn't dig deeper into, like, the context of, like, actual, like, culture that they were commenting on.
Yeah.
Like, The Hunger Games really, like, digs deep into, like, a lot of things you would see in, like, real life. And then those other stories with, like, the hindrances and, like, participation trophies and all that stuff, like, they, like, comment a little bit further back than I think some of the, like, surface level ones do. But even then, the surface level ones are just really good, fun and reads.
I agree. I think they're kind of fun. I think also some of it is, even if the author maybe didn't do as much digging into it, I feel like you as a person could do your own digging. So Divergent, I adored Divergent, honestly. Do I think it's, like, the best written book ever? No. I had fun, though. I enjoyed it. I talked about it a lot with my friends at the time.
Yeah, no. The Giver, I mean, Divergent was super, super fun. Super fun.
It was very fun.
There's a subclass of people who think Divergent is better than The Hunger Games. And I think if we're going solely on, like, their impact and social commentary in the way that they were written, the two best written ones for our generation, I think, are Legend and The Hunger Games. That's not to discount other dystopians that are fun to read.
Yeah. It's just a little different. Also, Hunger Games definitely did. Like, you cannot deny the springboard effect Hunger Games had for the dystopian genre. So you had all of these after that were kind of similar, but the original commentary I really do think was Suzanne Collins, especially for young adult, because obviously we've talked about some of the other ones that have come out, like Kurt Von Ewe. I think Olivia Blake.
Mac did in fact mean Octavia Butler.
Also has a bunch of them that are very interesting, and she did a bunch of dystopian, but they're all kind of marketed towards adult, and Hunger Games was definitely marketed towards, like, teenager, young adult.
Yeah.
I know one of the big things that Hunger Games gets compared to, and I don't know if you've heard this one before, it is a battle royale type of book, so people compare it a lot to the Japanese film Battle Royale.
Oh, I just recently saw something about this because someone was trying to say that
she ripped it off,
and then everyone was like, it's just like it's like a subset of genre that you could have. Like, she didn't rip anything off.
It's also like, have you seen Battle Royale?
No.
Okay, so I have, and they're very different, conceptually very different. Like, they both have, like, a death game, but a death game as a concept isn't necessarily original.
That goes back to the Romans.
Exactly.
I mean, like, come on.
Yeah. Because, like, Battle Royale, I mean, there's some, obviously, similarities. You have the totalitarian government, though in this case, the totalitarian government in Battle Royale is just Japan. And actually, it's kind of a crazy concept. It's even more unhinged, I think, than the Hunger Games as a concept, which is basically that there was, like, too much juvenile delinquency. So the government decides the way to get rid of it is to send a random class of junior high school students to, like, an island and make them fight to the death in this battle royale. And then there's one victor who, like, gets to leave. But the, like, plot of the movie, I honestly, I'm going to be so honest, I watched it for the first time at, like, 1 o'clock in the morning in a friend's basement. But so I don't remember the end of the movie because I think I fell asleep. But the movie basically follows some of the students as they try to, like, escape the island. There are definitely some similarities with the Hunger Games. Obviously, like, the death game. There is also explosive collars. So if kids don't, like, actually try to kill other people, their collar will explode and they'll die anyway. Which is all. It's not exactly in the Hunger Games, but you do have the like the trackers on all of the tributes and the pedestal that's explosive. But that I saw that take run around TikTok recently that people were like, the Hunger Games was ripped off, and I was like, that's spoken like someone who has not actually seen Battle Royale.
I feel like we also, like, people need to understand the nuance of, like, taking inspiration from there's only so many stories a person we can tell. Like, there's only so many stories. And a good story has a known formula. They talk about it all the time. Like, there's only so many stories you can tell. And taking nods from other pieces of literature and media is very normal. And very interesting, because then you get to see how people put their own twists on certain things. So I feel like they're, like, any similarity. They do this a lot with a lot of different medias, I feel like, on, like, social medias and stuff. Like, even songs, they'll be like, yes, this song sounds even slightly remotely similar. They're ripping it off. And I'm like, no, they're just making a nod. And that's okay.
That's okay. They can do that. Yeah. I know Suzanne Collins has said, I believe, that she had never seen Battle Royale. I know her actual inspiration. She has said that her inspiration for the Hunger Games was channel surfing. And she was going between Iraq, footage, like Iraqi war footage, and a, like, reality show, and she was like, that's an uncomfortable juxtaposition. I'm gonna write a book about that, which I think you could see. Obviously, I don't know if that's true, but you could see how that could definitely be the inspiration for something like the Hunger Games.
Oh yeah, like, it's so easy to get scooped. Nothing. I need everyone to listen to me loud and clear. Okay? You will never have a single individual thought. It happens in science, it happens in media, it happens in everything. You can get scooped. That's, like, the thing. Like, people are like, you need to get your science out there fast, because if you think of something and you start doing it, someone else is eventually going to think of it and start doing it too.
Yeah.
Same with writing, same with songs. Like, I wrote a book when I was a kid. It was fake, obviously never published it, but I was just messing around. You know what the plot was? High School Musical 3. Then High School Musical 3 came out.
Yeah, and then I had the foray in college where I wrote, like, half a book, and I was so excited I showed my partner, and he went, hey, that's just the plot of Halo. And I was like, that's so rude. Why would you say that to me?
It's just, like, the human brain and the way society is structured and the way we all have to interact with society. The likelihood that you're going to overlap thought processes with someone or come up with similar ideas is just so, like,
it's pretty high.
So unless they're, like, word for word or, like, plot device to plot device copying something, we all need to let go of the notion that people are ripping off other people to be malicious.
Exactly. I agree. Or that it, like, discounts the creativity of an author. Okay, I think we should just jump into spoilers. We've really not talked about the Hunger Games in the spoiler-free section.
It's so hard.
It's so hard.
It's hard to talk about it.
Yeah.
First, we have to do our, what did we rate this book?
Okay.
This was a 5-star for me.
Yeah, obviously.
Altered brain chemistry. It might have closed my frontal lobe at age 11. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe, honestly. Yes, definitely 5 out of 5. I made all my friends read it. My parents read it. I was like, everybody who is around me, you will be reading this book. Thank you. I'm just so happy now that the Haymitch one is going to come out. That's what I'm so excited about.
The way Suzanne Collins could write the same book in everyone's POV, and I would read everyone like it was a new book, is crazy.
I agree.
Like, any of those characters, she could have been like, she could write the Hunger Games from Haymitch's point of view, and I would eat it up.
That's fair, honestly.
Peeta's, I would go feral.
Oh, feral, actually. You want to do, let's do a little, shall we do favorite character? We did that once. We can do it a little again to round out our spoiler free.
Okay, yeah. Yes. Who is my favorite character? I think, actually, I'm gonna alter your question. Favorite character and character you feel like you related to most when you were a teenager reading this book. My favorite character, if we're just going first book, then my favorite character was Peeta, and the one I related to most was Peeta.
I love myself.
No, I love Peeta for all the reasons he's not like me, and I hate him for all the reasons he reminds me of myself.
Okay, let's expand it. Let's expand it to the other books.
Okay, expanding it to the other books, my favorite character is Finnick Odair.
So valid.
All right, your turn. Who's your favorite?
I think my favorite is Peeta.
Okay.
Just because I adore that boy. And reading it again, I was like, I adore him even more. He was so funny the whole time. It's, okay, who almost like is a little difficult. It is probably Prim, I think. But, like, I don't know. Except not as wishy-washy. It's like Prim later on when she, like, gets a spine. You know what I mean?
That's fair. I
don't know who else it would be, to be honest, because I would love to say Katniss. I just don't.
I think Katniss, honestly.
Oh, thank you.
I think we have this interesting thing where, like, you like do that thing with your friends, and you're like, if we were in this book, like, who would we each be? Mm-hmm. I think we have this interesting thing where there's always like a main character and then like a sub character behind the main character. That's just like books, you know. And I think individually as people, we typically tend to be the sub character, but then when we group together, one of us becomes the main character a little bit more, and the other, like, we were talking about this with Percy Jackson, because, like, everyone's like, you're an Athena person. I'm like, yeah, but if you put me in a room with, like, Mac, who is more Athena than me, like, more Annabeth than me, I become Percy Jackson, because I'm just feral.
Exactly. Like, it's true, though, actually.
And I feel like that's how we are with the, like, Peeta and Katniss. I feel like I can see both of. I mean, Katniss is supposed to be someone you can see yourself in, right? But, like, I feel like you become more Katniss when you're put in the context of your other friends.
That's fair. I could see that.
You've got that energy of, I'm gonna do something wild right now, and everyone's gonna be like, why the hell did you do that? And I'm not explaining myself.
And it's more fun if you don't explain yourself.
You're doing crazy things. I'm lying.
Together, we're Katniss and Peeta.
All right, with that, we're going to go into our spoiler section.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
How did you feel? Okay, I always have these, like, back and forths on, do you prefer books that have info dumps at the beginning, or do you prefer books where you have to find everything else out during the book?
This is a great question, actually.
My opinion is that the Hunger Games kind of hit it in a perfect balance. This is going to be an interesting episode because I'm not going to have much in terms of critique because I just love this book so much and I read it when I was so young. But I feel like the Hunger Games strike a good balance because they start like 74 years in to this like system. So there's already so much established. But you are still getting a lot of info dump from Katniss at the beginning to set the scene. So, like, I'm typically someone who hates an info dump. I want to be confused.
Let me be confused.
Well, if you keep me confused, I'm more likely to stay enthralled for longer.
To become unconfused.
Well, no, that too. I would hope. If I'm not unconfused by the end of the book, I probably hate your book. But I do this thing where, I read the end of books before I finish the book. And typically I do that if you give me too much information right at the beginning, and then I can start speculating a lot more than I could if you don't give me too much information at the beginning. Because then if you give me too much information, then I want to know if I'm right.
Right.
Or, like, if the mystery is too loose, or people I feel like are being too dense about something. Like, if they're like, I don't know why I'm special. And I'm like, obviously you're part of this group. Like, I don't know why anyone is questioning.
It's so obvious.
Like, it's so obvious why you have these powers. Please stop. Like, then I'm reading the end of the book. But if you don't give me enough information and I'm confused and I can't make any speculations, I'm just reading straight through because I don't even know what to think yet.
That's fair. Yeah, I agree. I think there is definitely a lot of information at the beginning of the book, but you definitely need it to understand anything that's going on. But you also get a lot as it progresses because you're just kind of going along for the ride with her.
Yeah.
I sort of enjoy a little bit of a info dump, to be honest, with some caveats. Sometimes it gets too long and then I'm like, I'm out. But most of the time I kind of enjoy it. But I also quite like really heavy world building books, so that often is accompanied by a pretty solid lore dump at the beginning.
Yeah. And maybe that's the crux of it too. I think I'm more character driven. If you give me really good characters that I'm really involved with no good plot, I'm still enjoying your book.
That's fair. I could agree with that. But there are so many details about the Hunger Games that do a great job at the social commentary aspect of it in so many various ways. I know one of the biggest ways that it's so obvious is there's like Tesserae, which is basically, for the Hunger Games, it basically works. You put your name goes into a bowl and they draw it out, and every year your name goes in another time. Tesserae, you can put your name in more times to basically get food for your family. And it is such an on-the-nose representation for how poverty puts you back in life that it is astounding to me now that as a child I did not see that. And then I looked at it again. I was like, that's just fully just, I guess it's not a metaphor because it's happening in the actual book, but it's such a clear representation of how poverty can just put you put you behind, so it's harder just to get even to the same level someone else was at. Even if it doesn't mean necessarily something bad fully happened to you, but you have the chance of something catastrophic happening.
I feel like it's a great representation of, like, equality versus equity. Like,
yeah.
The idea that everyone's name is in and it's a random draw feels like it's giving equality, right? It's, like, equal. But then when you really dig deep and looking at, like, where's everyone starting at equity-wise, like, Tesserae is the equivalent of being like, I have to start behind you because of, like, where I am in life.
Exactly.
Like, social status and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to see as a kid. I feel like you knew, you were like, oh, it sucks, poor people are at a disadvantage. You can get that across. But then you get older and you realize the depth that it would go.
Exactly. You realize how good of a representation it really was. Besides just, like, being poor sucks.
Even though, like, the idea of, like, it's brought up, but then, like, the whole, like, central, like, her sister being picked and then her having to volunteer for her goes against it because her sister has her name in there once.
Bad things can still happen to you.
Bad things do happen to Prim.
Yeah. That's a pretty central theme of the book, to be honest. Of the whole series. But that's a pretty big one. Even just, it's very interesting, even the dynamics between districts, how much, like, District 12 hates the inner districts, but then you still kind of see from the inner district's perspective, they're, like, still also getting fucked over, even if their quality of life is better. And it's just a really interesting kind of commentary on everybody suffers under capitalism.
Yeah. Well, you get the military complexy and, like, vibes of the, like, more rich districts, right? With, like, the idea that, like, they're trained from young and they're promised things, like, our American soldiers are in our cafeterias in high school, like, we'll give you college if you fight for us.
Yeah.
That's odd. That's an odd thing.
Yeah.
No, but there's so many things in that book that are just like the symbolism goes crazy. Or like the commentary and putting it in the perspective of their world.
Yeah. Obviously, reality TV is such a big part of it, which obviously we still have reality TV. But I would love to come back to your point about social media because...
Okay, yes. I could go on a rant about this for days. Me and my roommate at the time, no longer live with this person, but me and my roommate were talking about this because we were rewatching all the Hunger Games movies. Mm-hmm. And there's obviously the reality TV show aspect of it, but she doesn't really integrate a lot of social media into it. But we were talking about this in the terms of like social media. Mm-hmm. What would it look like if like a TikTok was a thing during the Hunger Games? Like, because you see this like TikTok during like the Olympics and all that stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think people would lean into it a little bit. I feel like it would be crazy. You'd be seeing crazy shit on TikTok. You'd be getting like ship edits of two district people who form an alliance.
Yeah. Yes, you
like,
would.
You'd
be
get
getting like fan cams,
murder compilations, edits,
yeah,
fan cams. The comments would be crazy.
Yes.
I was just gonna say it'd be such an interesting dynamic, but then we raised the question: if you were in the district, if you were a capital person, if you were not someone who was raised in the district, you were raised in the capital, mm-hmm. do you think you would be a kind of person who had the propensity to be sucked into it?
That's so hard. Obviously, you hope the answer is no, but it's also like people in the capital are essentially brainwashed, or like desensified from kind of terrible violence. And this honestly happens even now on TikTok, obviously not to the same extent. But you have, this is a kind of a little bit of different, but you know, like the K-pop survival shows, I was talking to you about this show. Some of the contestants were treated really poorly in this one show I was watching recently. Like they had to work while being very, very sick. They like manipulated some of the girls. They told like other girls things that other girls had said, that they had specifically said, like, we are not releasing these videos, and it was about who they wanted to move forward with, and kind of playing psychological warfare on these girls. And these girls had all signed up thinking it was a training camp, and then they were just suddenly on this survival show. And people have all these edits of these girls about it, and I was like, these people, are they okay? Like, what is going on? It's a similar vibe, though, to be honest, I feel like maybe I wouldn't, because it's a similar vibe to people who write fanfic about real people, which I think is insane.
There is an element of, like, I don't think I would do it, because I don't like anything that's morally gray. Call it the OCD, if you will. It is the OCD. But I have, like, a big struggle with moral. I mean, I live in a black and white world sometimes, and I feel like that would just push it too far. I'd be like, if I watch a single Hunger Games TikTok, I'm going to hell.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, also fanfiction about real people. That also is very big.
It's honestly really quite dehumanizing, in my opinion. It's like, those are real people. It's like weird. Imagine someone doing that to you. This comes up a lot because I see a lot of F1 edits with shipping random drivers. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. I think it's kind of crazy because I imagine being that driver and being like, why are people shipping me with my work colleague? Those are not as bad as the fanfics, to be clear. But the fanfics exist, and they come up because I like the Formula One, and I do like the sad edits of drivers. And right now, an American driver just got let go. And there are so many sad edits of this man leaving. But then I will occasionally get, like, fully just fanfic recommendations of two drivers. And I'm like, I think that's a little odd. Both of them have partners who are other people.
Yeah. I, feel like I can appreciate people, liking someone's, relationship. And how they, interact with each other. I think it gets weird when you add a romantic subtext to it. Like, an edit of just about being like, I love the way they interact with each other is very different than being like, they are in love with each other. They're gonna leave their wives.
Yeah, because there are some who are like, these two yap together all of the time. It is Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. All they do is yap. Mm-hmm. And that is so fun. And I agree. They do seem like they are great yap partners. But then you'll see some where people seem a little too serious about the fact that they're secretly in love with each other. And I'm like, I mean, do you? If that's what you think, that's fine. I would be very uncomfortable if I was either one of those men about my friend. Yeah. So I do think social media would have been such an interesting addition to these books.
Yes. Can you imagine a ship edit of like Peeta and Katniss?
Well, that would have happened 100%.
That's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
imagine it.
Yeah.
Like, it would have been like some intense Taylor Swift song.
Mm-hmm.
Like, actually, you know what? We don't even have to imagine it. You know why we don't have to imagine it? Because it's just what they do with the movie.
Yes.
I've seen edits to The Great War about those two in the games. I've seen edits to Noah Khan, Hosier's Francesca. There would be edits.
There would be edits.
And they would be crazy.
They would make me cry.
And you know what? They might suck me in.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now that I think about it, they might suck me in.
Because those, the ones for the movie, they do suck me in. I cry about them. Every once in a while, you get one and you're like, I am just crying.
Every time there's a Hosier edit to Francesca and he's like, I tell them to put me back in it, I'm like, I'm dead. I'm crying in my room.
Actually, I can't do this. Thank you.
The first book is, so I actually want to talk about this too, because we breaking this into like multiple episodes, and I think it's because, well, I suggested this, and the reason I suggested the way that we broke them up is because the first book and the last book are very good books, but I don't know how to talk about them. Like, I don't know what parts to bring up that like stick out to me so much. There's obviously like the Peeta bomb drop of like, I came to the games with the girl that I like, so I can't like get her.
Yeah.
And then I was pissed because Katniss was like, how dare he make me look weak? I was like, bro,
He's...
since when does someone having a crush on you make you look weak?
I will say, I agree. I adored Katniss when I first read the books. And then rereading it, it is almost painful at the end when it is not almost, it is actually painful at the end when she's just playing it up for the cameras, basically, and not really manipulating his emotions. She's not doing it on purpose. Like, she is doing it on purpose, but she's not doing it to fuck with him. She's doing it to play into the Capitol's, like, perception of them. But it is still so painful to read. And you're like, that man is actually in love with her. And thinks that this is real. And then you have a point at the end where she's like, okay, we just have to keep on doing what we were doing. And he was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And she's like, put it on the act. And he's like, I have not been acting. I truly don't know what you mean. And it killed me.
Okay. I am on Katniss's side. That is not the reason I disliked. Like, it did not ruin her for me. I did not feel anything. I actually was more upset with Peeta in the way that he handled that than anything, because he put her into that situation in the first place. Like, he shared that information to the public, and he made that the narrative that they were spinning. And all Katniss did was make them survive.
No. I agree with that.
But then at the end, everyone's like, yeah, he's justified in being upset. And I'm like, he's not. I'm so sorry. He's not justified at all. Like, he can be upset. He can be hurt, but he should not be. And this kind of leans into the next book a little bit, but the way he treats her at the beginning of the next book is just unfair to her, because she didn't do like anything. It wasn't like at the end she was like, yeah, I actually fucking hate you, don't ever talk to me again. She was just like, yeah, this is just how we're gonna have to live our life now, but we both survived. Like, she saved your life, dude.
No, that's fair. It's just painful to read, not because it makes her unlikable. It's painful to read because as a reader, you know what's going on, and she sort of knows what's going on, and he has no idea what's going on, and it is just very sad. One of the parts that I thought was so funny, in the book, specifically about Katniss and Peeta, is that when they get to the Capitol and Peeta's just being a nice guy, he's like friendly and talking to her and helping Haymitch, and she's like, I think he's a nice person, and I have to stay far, far away from that. It was like, that is hilarious. It's objectively so funny.
Yeah. My little baby boy Peeta he's so kind and too pure for the world that he lives in.
It's sad.
But he's also a little shit.
He is sometimes a little shit. Actually, a lot of the times he's a little shit.
He's like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna rob them blind. I'm going to join the careers.
And then Katniss is going to think that he's actually trying to kill her.
She's like, so much for a crush.
He didn't care about me at all. Or after they're like very clearly friends for a little bit in the time when they're training, he asks at some point to start being trained separately. I'm pretty sure he does it actually because, you know, she's uncomfortable with the whole confession thing.
Well, he doesn't confess. He doesn't confess till after that, right?
No, because there's a point they do the interviews, and then I think that they have a little bit of time that they're still training.
No, they go into like the arena very shortly after, because I remember she being like, there's like a line that sticks out in my brain every time, and it's her being like, first you don't want to like you act like you don't even like me because you don't want to train with me, you want to do all the things separately, but you have a crush on me. And I was like,
you're right.
I'm like, homie, listen to yourself. If he has a crush on you, it makes sense he doesn't want to be around you. He has to kill you in a week.
It checks out. But yeah, she's like, we can finally stop pretending to be friends. And I'm like, my dude, it's not pretending at this point. You guys are definitely friends. I'm so sorry.
Katniss doesn't have friends. She doesn't understand that concept. She has one friend, and they're like trauma bonded. I don't even know.
They are 100% trauma bonded. I would actually, can we take a really quick foray and we can talk about Gale?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about him, but you can talk about him.
Okay. I know we watched the movies recently and everyone's like, fucking hate Gale. Which is fair. He's not particularly a fun character. But I will say in the first book, rereading it, I was like, damn, she does actually. You can tell she legitimately loves him. It might be, it's more like platonic love, but you can tell she definitely does. And I think sometimes that kind of got away. Especially in the movies, I don't think you really feel it. And in the book, you can tell that they're definitely like trauma bonded. Both their dads died at like a very young age, and they basically were like, we're gonna stop our family starving to death, which will trauma bond you, I have to imagine.
Yeah. No, I don't dislike Gale as much as like I do for the meme of it all. I think he doesn't really get bad until about like,
he doesn't get bad until the third book, I feel like. Or no, he has some shit in the second book. I think he's mad in the second book.
Yeah, I think for me, like, the two boys get messed up for me a lot in the second book when it becomes about the love triangle and how they're handling it. Mm-hmm. Though it's not like, it's hard to say a love triangle because I think it's a love triangle for Gale. Gale thinks that they're in a love triangle. Peeta's just hurt because he thought she actually kind of liked him. Yeah. And Katniss is just like, I don't know why these boys are acting up. My family is starving and I have things to do.
I accidentally started a revolution. My love life, not the priority at the moment, guys. Please.
Listen, I'm just trying to live life, and President Snow keeps rolling up in my house, acting like I said something crazy on live television. All I did was save me and me and my friend that went into together, like, and now everyone's acting brand new. And Gale's like, oh my god, she's kissed someone else. I can't live like this.
I'm like, this is not the time. This is not the time.
And Peeta's like, oh my god. Everything that she said in the arena that saved our lives and is making me the person that I am and able to be alive today was so fake. And I'm like, that's when the boys get ruined for me, because I'm like, can everyone please just, everyone needs to stop being a little emo and start, like, you know,
getting with the program,
addressing things. Peeta, you need to address the fact that, you know, this is your life now. If the worst of your life is that you got to survive and now you just have to act like you're in love with the girl that you're in love with, I think you'll be okay.
I think it could be worse.
Gale, I'm tired of your hissy fits. I'm over it. I'm over it. And I think that's where Gale gets ruined for me. Because he's not a bad character at first. He's, like, truly just like her friend. And, like, they love each other. They care deeply for each other. And then, like, and he had time to make a move. He made no moves.
He made a move when it was too fucking late.
He saw her macking on someone else, and he was like, that's my girl. And Katniss is like,
I'm not your girl.
Katniss is kissing Peeta, and she's like, anyway, I hope the sponsors send us some good stuff for this.
Yeah, the first time she kisses him, it's so funny, because she's talking about it. She's like, he is so fever-rich. His lips are so hot.
She's like, we need meds now. Time to smooch. Like, we're selling this, guys.
That's fair.
And, like, I think that's also a good nod to how, you know, we talk about how, like, Peeta plays the games, which is, like, everyone's always like, he like outsmarts the games. He plays the crowd, blah, 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 blah. Katniss was like, she caught on quickly and played the games very well. Like, she was like, oh, they're making this so that we can have the love story that they want. And she leaned into it.
The way that they play the games is so different, because Peeta definitely did really well play the games, but it was more that he was just himself, a slightly like more exaggerated version of himself probably, but still fundamentally who he is as a person. Katniss basically gamed it out when I can do that. I can game it out, and then executed. So fair, so valid.
Peeta picked a persona, and Katniss said, "Are you not entertained?" Is
Exactly.
really what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. It's Katniss is hilarious, honestly, throughout this whole book. She has a few things that really get me. Which one of the times is at the end when she's actively being chased because the District 1 kids are trying to kill her. And she, in her head, is taking the time to be like their ridiculous fucking names as she's running for her life.
She just never learns anyone's names.
She's like, what kind of fucking name is Glimmer? It's such a dumb name. I'm like, girl, they are chasing you. Run.
Between that and then just calling that one girl Foxface because she looks like a fox.
That one ginger girl never lived it down. Kind of said she's ginger and she's got a pointy face.
You, Foxface.
Fox.
And that's all you'll ever be.
And that's it. Honestly, iconic. And then when at the beginning, when Effie is like, the last districts had terrible table manners. So glad that you guys know how to use a fork and knife. And Katniss goes, actually, fuck you. Puts down the knife and just starts eating with her hands. More iconic behavior. We love that.
That almost stabbing Haymitch's hand. Like,
Yes. Unhinged.
She's an icon. She's the ultimate brat.
She is. Katniss was just having her brat Hunger Games, to be honest.
You know, she's giving the energy of, like, a kid who's, like, fine, and then you tell them to do something, and then they're suddenly angry about it.
Yeah, that is definitely the vibe. And honestly, that's really fair.
You know what I hate to this day that they didn't put into the Hunger Games?
Mm-hmm.
Is Haymitch falling off the stage at the reaping.
I agree. That would have been so funny. And honestly, he is way too put together in the movies. He is so much messier in the book. Like, I know he's sort of drunk in the movie. He is drunk, like unfunctional drunk in the books. To the degree that he is not a character until pretty much the last like third of the book, when he's basically not even there in person. He's the like sponsor gifts, and then at the end
they gave him like a little bit too much of like he's a mean drunk quirky guy, like mean drunk but like wisdomy. He was like falling off the stage, showing up late to the reaping drunk.
Yeah, like was basically incoherent on the train drunk. Peeta had to pull him into a bathtub drunk, which actually this is a good segue, I feel, into another topic, which is how they address mental health in the Hunger Games. Which, because obviously
there's no therapy.
There is no therapy in Panem. Haymitch is just self-medicating with alcohol, which is pretty valid. But they even had this whole thing at the beginning with Katniss's mother and how she clearly had basically like very intense depression. Katniss is understandably angry about it. Obviously, mental illness is real, but Katniss is like, you cannot be non-functional. And her mom is like, if I could have had medicine, I could have treated it. And I was like, wow, that's really, it was definitely I thought it was an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. I can't remember. Do they have meds for it? And she just,
her mom is basically like, if I had the proper herbs, I could have healed myself. And so I think the implication was that like they didn't have access to the herbs that she needed to actually treat herself.
Like, sometimes it was so interesting to read the Hunger Games because you forget that it's supposed to be the future because of the way that they interact with certain things. Like, they're like, we all gathered in our town square. If you're this far into the future, you probably have a stadium.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, that's the thing. It's like kind of regressional because even like in the prequel, they gather in the first Hunger Games arena is a football stadium. It's an old football stadium They don't know it's a football stadium, but we as the reader can tell it's a football stadium, which is
Because
interesting.
it's the ruins of North America.
Yeah.
There is stadiums places. Like, the idea that their infrastructure is, like,
Completely
did they
gone.
level every single district and rebuild?
I would love some clarity on what happened. But, like, how many years in the future is the Hunger Games supposed to have taken place? Because there's been a lot of apparent just, like, destruction.
Because there was floods, from my understanding of the timeline, there was, like, floods that led to, like, a dystopian world. Then the floods led to the formation of, like, a reformation of government in Penem. And then there was the capital and the districts, and the capital was being run by all that stuff. And then the districts became fed up with the way the capital chose to re-government, and then there was an uprising trying to take power away from the capital. And then after that uprising, there was the Hunger Games was, like, developed, because the districts were already established before the uprising that led to the Hunger Games.
No, I know a lot of it's supposed to be climate change, like the aftermath of a bunch of climate change. But yeah, just not some flooding. I guess it's supposed to be fairly major flooding, but I still don't think it necessarily would have led to the collapse of the government. I feel like something else had to have happened, realistically.
Was, like, DC encapsulated in the flooding?
But it's like, did every political leader die in the flooding in DC? But then also, like, then that's not climate change flooding. That's like a tsunami or something, because regular flooding, you have time to leave.
If there was, like, was there just, like, a mass tsunami on both ends of the continent, each like side of the continent, that flooded both sides of the continent at the exact same time, so fast that no government official, including the president, could make it out of the areas, because they would just relocate the president.
Exactly. I'm like, just losing the physical area of DC, I really feel like would not do that much to. It obviously would be upsetting as, like, a, you know, I don't know, symbolism thing. And people live here, so that would be upsetting. But, like, you could definitely run the country from somewhere else. Like, it would be possible.
Like, the capital is moved, so the idea that, like, it wasn't, like, I have such a hard time trying to grasp how the downfall of America got to the point where they had it, like, the system that they had.
I feel like it has to be something about the energy grid, and I feel like something had to have changed where, like, basically the energy grid is fundamentally broken. And I could see how that would lead to a rather dramatic collapse of civilization. That and the internet. I think if you kind of lost both of those things, that would cause a very dramatic change. But I'm not that kind of engineer. I don't know enough about the energy grid to be like, what kind of catastrophe would happen that it was so broken that you couldn't even fix it? Because it's even weirder. They use coal to power to power Panem. It's hydropower and coal.
Yeah. So they must have lost some form of, like, their, like, electrical grid. Like, the electricity was gone. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then, like, how far in the future is this that they don't even, like, talk about it? You know what I mean? You know what also is sorry. You know what's so funny? I love the fact that they have a high-speed rail in Panem, but we, in current non-dystopian America, cannot have a high-speed railway system.
They said, everything's collapsing, but we will be building a high-speed system. I mean, unless they built it before the collapse and then they just, like, maintained it. But, like,
they just kept it. Maybe.
And, like, certain, like, aspects, like, there's, like, clear technological advancement in the capital, but then they act like the districts are in the fucking dark ages sometimes. Like, they act like District 12 has never, like...
Yeah.
Like, they're still working with, like, the fridges that have ice in the bottom to keep your food cold all day. Like, I'm like, she's like, if I had the right herbs, I could have cured myself. Take a Prozac.
Have you heard of Lexapro?
Prozac existed, and you could be like, oh well, the capital is, like, harboring resources, and that's why they have so much more technical advancement. They would still be able to access, like, the stuff that was available at the time of, like, the collapse.
I know. It had to have been, the thing is, it has to just have been so far in the future that, like, any infrastructure has essentially collapsed. But it's like, why would that happen? The only thing that sort of makes sense is that there was some sort of, like, extensive bombing of the entire North America that essentially leveled infrastructure, I feel like, is what it has to have been. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Is the idea that, like, there was an environmental collapse that led to, like, there was environmental things that led to, like, collapses of, like, the grid, the electrical grid and all that stuff, which, like, disrupted just general functioning of the country, and then the idea that you're farther into, like, this, like, less technologically advanced access to things comes after the fact that they had a war. So it's like a two-pronged thing. So I'm thinking about this wrong specifically. It's like there was first the collapse of America that didn't necessarily impact technology and their infrastructure. Then the war is the collapse of infrastructure.
I have no idea. To be honest, to be clear, I'm fully spitballing on how I think this could have occurred.
No, I like this. I like this theory. We should reach out to Suzanne Collins because she'll definitely entertain our time, and we'll be like, what we really need to discuss is the infrastructure of how this happened, please.
Yeah, because the way that it works in my mind, it has to just be super far in the future, is how I interpret the Hunger Games, because there is no clear real through line from, though it is definitely implied that some sort of war happened, because America basically becomes super isolationist, which I guess could happen in the absence of any war, because we've had presidents who were super isolationist recently we've been at war for a while. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It does matter, but it's not the point of this podcast.
I was running under the impression that the environmental factors got so bad that, like, each country just became, like, secluded because they needed to harbor
their own resources.
Everyone needed to harbor their own resources at that point because everything was so, like, fucked from the, like, environment and the collapse of just, like, large portions of everyone's land.
Okay, so, that's fair.
That was my, like, I questioned less why America was so exclusionary. More, I was like, what happened to the technology? Like, I'm confused on this disparity of technology that we see across, like, every single district.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
And I think it's, like, I think the point was to try to, like, harbor in how poor District 12 was. Mm-hmm. But, like, even in our poorest districts, like, even in our poorest America now, like, there is still access. Like, there's things that happen to maintain, especially because they're giving them coal, which is one of their biggest exports to help maintain the capital's, like, energy supply and all that stuff. Like, there's no way they wouldn't be putting in infrastructure to maintain, like, enough of the, like, people so that they can still successfully run the rest of the country.
Yeah, I don't often think about how realistic Panem would have been to create, because it's never discussed in the book, so it's, like, not something Suzanne Collins seems to be super...
It keeps me up at night.
That's so fair. It's a lot different from something like Legend, where it's very clearly stated, I feel like. Not very clearly, but pretty clearly stated what happened. And the type of changes that happened in Legend make a lot of sense. Feel realistic. Obviously exaggerated, but, like, fairly realistic.
And the thing is, for me, is, like, the Hunger Games isn't even necessarily, like, I need to know exactly every step of the collapse of the America and the formation of Panem. I am solely hung up on the, like, disparity that you kind of get when you're reading about the technology between the two. Like, what do you mean you're just not popping a Prozac? Like, it would be more believable for me if she was just like, we couldn't afford to get my mom Prozac. That is something that's real, and something that happens here still to this day in, like, non-dystopian America. Like, healthcare. You're telling me at the collapse our healthcare didn't improve? I could believe that.
That makes sense.
Why are we resorting to herbs? I'm a little confused.
I think that specifically in the districts, it's, like, artificially keeping technology not there is what I would guess, because technology exists in other districts. Because, like, don't remember what the number is. One of the districts that does all the technology, they have a lot of random shit. He was like, I know about transistors and...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, there's such a large disparity that it seems like...
I think it's an artificially imposed thing to keep people kind of tamped down. That would be my guess.
But like, why District 12 specifically?
If my guess would be because it's District 12 and District 11 are both pretty technologically inadept, and I have to imagine it's because it's a big labor force. You need a lot of labor to plant things and to mine. And that's the sort of people you wouldn't want to know that there exist better jobs. You would want them to only ever think about the job you want them to do. And you wouldn't ever want them to have technology to then become like a revolution. That would be my guess.
That's fair. I guess like District 13 did try to rebel. I forget what was District 13's export.
They were nuclear. So
yeah.
Their cover was graphite, but they actually were doing like nuclear power, if I remember, or nuclear weapons, I guess, or both maybe. They were definitely at least nuclear energy, which would make sense for the power situation in general.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So it's like an artificial. If you put it in that perspective, that makes sense. Because for me, I was just like, when I was a kid, I couldn't understand it. I was like, I am confused on if this is early or late. Like, what is going on? How can you need herbs, but also they've made platforms that if you step off of, there's pressure sensors that will explode.
And like in the capital, the medicine is really, really good. So you know that the good medicine exists. It just doesn't exist in the districts.
How do you have a salve that if you put it on your wound, you wake up the next day and you're fine, even though that man was about to lose his leg? But your mom needs herbs to fix her depression.
Gonna drink a tea about my depression.
You know what? I know there's people who still do that to this day. But if Katniss could have given her mom some Prozac and sent her on her way, I fully believe she would have.
I agree.
But before we end, let's talk. What's your favorite part that happens in specifically the first book? What's your favorite scene?
I think my favorite scene is when they're on there's two. Okay, so my favorite scene, like, overall is when they're on the parade and she gets lit on fire and PETA looks at her and he's like, I'll rip yours off if you rip mine. I think that's funny. And the whole scene is like kind of wild with like being in the middle of the Capitol, and it's the beginning of them getting like poised as a couple. I quite enjoy that scene. I think it's funny. Mostly I think the line is funny. And I think Cinna has a few lines in that are also amusing. But one of my favorite like written scenes in the book was when Prim's name is called. Katniss the whole time leading up to it is thinking, just don't be my name, just don't be my name, just don't be my name. And then she goes, and it's not me. It's Primrose Everdeen. And then you don't hear what happens after that. It immediately flips back to this flashback where she's falling out of a tree and getting the wind knocked out of her. And it was such a visceral way of describing how she was feeling in that moment that it is such a good example of excellent writing in the book that I heard it and I was like, damn, that was a great idea. I will never write something that is as good as that, as to demonstrate being so taken off guard. So yeah, that's one of my favorites, I think.
Yeah, my favorite is when she's high on Tracker Jacker venom and you start getting a little bit more insight into like the dad dying kind of stuff, and I was like, this is wild.
Oh, we didn't talk about Rue at all.
It's because it hurts my soul.
Yeah, that's fair, because that's another favorite scene. And favorite, I mean, one that makes me viscerally sob. Is when
she puts the flowers on Rue and like gives her a proper like burial. That is, I think Rue is such an interesting character too, because I feel like she is supposed to represent like what Prim would have been. Like if Katniss didn't volunteer, Prim would have been like a Rue kind of situation. And I'm like, she was so impactful, and then I can't even like, I don't even know how to talk about it because I get so angry.
Because she is definitely supposed to be, and Katniss recognizes it, I think, that Rue is kind of the stand-in for Prim. But what's interesting is I think Rue is a lot more similar to Katniss than she is to Rue, or that she is to Prim. And it was something really quite sad about Katniss trying to save this like childhood version of herself and then just failing, like very clearly and dramatically and painfully failing.
And I feel like it's the first time you really have to like reckon with the fact that like she's gonna make relationships, and at the end of this, everyone has to die.
Yeah, that one's the first. I think that's really the first death in that book that hits really, really hard.
Yeah, because like the kids you've seen die at that point, you had no like information on her and emotional connection, and then like there's like the idea that you have to make alliances, but this is a game of death. Like at the end of the day, everyone's dying except for one person.
Yeah, that sucked. That one hurts a lot.
I think that's the one that like finally sank in for me too when I was reading the books. Like I was like, yeah, people are dying, and I think that it's just a testament to like desensitization of like, this is the scenario that we're in. This is what like it's like when you hear about like you still get sad, but you're like, you hear about crazy things happening now, but you're so used to it that you're kind of like, okay, it's just like another day in the life of living in like the world, and that's how it was. And then it's like it finally affects you, and you're like, oh shit.
Especially because they go from this elation of having successfully blown up all the career supplies, and Katniss is like, we did it, we're in a better place than they are, we can actually do this, like we're gonna make it to the end. And then as she's waiting, she's like pretty happy almost the entire time coming up to it. She's like just hanging out, and she's like, it's a little weird that she's late, but I'm sure it's fine. And then she gets worried and then runs to go get her, and like it's just this awful being just too late, just a little bit too late.
That's the thing, it's the just too late. It's not the like, there was so many things that she added into that death that just like made it.
And I think that's her first very direct kill in the arena, is that boy. I think she was just like, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was kind of indirect, but that was very direct, killing this kid, as this visceral reaction to trying to protect Prim.
Is that her only direct kill?
Technically no, because technically she kills Cato, but Cato dies mostly to the mutts, and then
and then she shoots him in the head.
Yeah.
The ending scene is like the mutts with their eyes. Mm-hmm. That was like so chilling to me. I was like genuinely scared.
Yeah, yes, because there's that unknowing of, she's so unsure, and there's no respect really in the Capitol, so she's so unsure whether they actually took the tribute's eyes or if it was just engineered. But being unsure if it happened is so freaky. And you can tell it freaks her out, and it freaks you out as a reader. You're like, there's something so wrong about it.
The eeriness of like when you're a reader and you're reading it and you have to picture it yourself. The words can only do so much for your own brain. So trying to imagine it yourself is crazy, because you're trying to add human features to something that's so not human that you're like, wait, how is this work? Like you kind of make a humanoid-ish thing in your own head. And I was like, I'm scaring myself.
This is freaky, and in my own head. It hits. The end of the book really hits a lot. It's just emotionally exhausting.
The whole book is just a hit after a hit after a hit, and you're like, this is crazy.
Well, the biggest thing is that you get a kind of a little break, because in the Capitol it's this weird dichotomy of being really well taken care of but also being terrifying, and then she gets to the actual arena, and she's almost comfortable for a while because she's just hanging out in the woods. She's not really seeing a lot of people. It's going okay, and then you have like maybe the one incident with the tracker jacker and stuff, but then she's with Rue and things are kind of good again and all of this stuff, and then the end of the book is just the punches don't stop coming, and then they get out and you're like, oh my god, relief, it should be over, and then it's so not. They take Peeta's leg, they have the whole thing where Haymitch goes up to her and is like, you gotta fucking act like your life depends on it, because yours does, and all of your family.
Yeah. Like, imagine winning it and finally being like, oh god, this is over, and then coming out and they're like, you're on the verge of starting a revolution, and if you make one misstep, we're killing your family.
Exactly. It's just insane. The end of the book just kills you.
So that's all for this week. We will pick up again with this conversation next week, next Wednesday, part 2. We'll talk about Catching Fire and Mockingjay, hopefully. So we'll talk next week. Remember, reading should be fun.
Reading should be fun. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of The Crisis of Readers. If you are enjoying our content, please subscribe. And we will be here every Wednesday.